Welcome to the very first episode of the Mindful Patch podcast. My name is Anixica, and I'm so grateful you're here. Whether you've tuned in to keep me company on your morning commute as background ambiance while you tackle some chores, or because you're winding down with your favorite game, this podcast is here to be your companion, a gentle space for reflection and connection. If you're watching the video version of this episode, you'll notice something a little different. Instead of high-stakes raids or heated PvP battles, you're seeing my in-game character peacefully gathering herbs and mining for ore, flying through vibrant forests, pausing to collect the treasures of the land. It's a backdrop designed to complement what this podcast is all about. For me, gathering has always been the quiet heart of gaming. There's something grounding about it, something rhythmic and meditative. It's not flashy, it's not about adrenaline, it's about finding calm in the chaos, carving out a little patch of serenity in a world that can feel overwhelming, both in-game and out. Gathering, to me, is an antidote. It's a small, meaningful act that mirrors something we all need in real life. Moments to pause, to take stock, and to nurture ourselves. And isn't that what we're all looking for? Whether we're facing the stresses of work, relationships, and the never-ending grind of daily responsibilities, we all need those pockets of peace to ground ourselves. As someone who's spent countless hours flying through digital skies, pausing to pick a flower or strike a rock, I can tell you that these moments, simple and repetitive as they seem, can be deeply healing. They're a chance to let your mind wander, to process, and to just exist. And in many ways, that's the essence of this podcast. So why call it the Mindful Patch? Well, like many things in gaming, it's a name with layers. For those of you who are gamers, a patch is what developers release to fix bugs, balance gameplay, and sometimes even overhaul entire systems. It's about making things better, more functional, more enjoyable. But patch also brings to mind the patches of land we gather from. The herbalist's secluded glade, the miner's hidden vein, these are places of quiet purpose. These little patches of digital earth remind us to slow down, to be present, to find beauty in the small and the simple. And then there's the healing aspect. Whether it's a bandage on a wound or a software update, a patch represents the decision to improve. To acknowledge that something isn't working and to take the steps needed to fix it. That's what this podcast is about, not just in gaming, but in life. Now, let me ask you, have you ever logged off a game feeling worse than when you logged on? Maybe you joined a group that turned toxic. Maybe you pushed yourself to grind just one more level, one more dungeon, one more goal. And instead of feeling accomplished, you felt burnt out. I've been there. And I know I'm not alone. Gaming is supposed to be our escape, our joy, our playground. But too often, it becomes the opposite. And that's not just a gaming problem, it's a human problem. It's about how we handle stress, how we interact with others, and how we set boundaries and take care of ourselves. That's what the Mindful Patch podcast is here to explore. How do we make gaming a healthier space? How do we create communities that uplift rather than tear down? How do we as individuals bring mindfulness into our gaming lives? And how does that ripple out into the wider world? As someone who has spent years navigating chronic illness and disabilities, I've come to see gaming as both a lifeline and a challenge. On one hand, it's a place of connection, creativity, and joy. On the other, it can be a source of frustration, toxicity, and even harm. That duality is what fascinates me, and it's what this podcast is here to unpack. Gaming communities are microcosms of the real world. They reflect our values, our struggles, our potential. And by understanding what works and what doesn't in these virtual spaces, we can learn so much about ourselves. Each episode of the Mindful Patch podcast will take a gaming topic as a lens to explore something bigger. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about games we play. It's about the lives we live. It's about how we treat each other, how we handle adversity, and how we grow. And that's where you come in. This podcast isn't just about me, it's about us as a community. Whether you're a gamer or just someone curious about human behavior, I want this to be a space where we can reflect, learn, and grow together. For our first episode, we're diving into a hot topic from one of the most iconic games in the MMO world, World of Warcraft. Blizzard Entertainment recently released a blue post announcing that they've started banning players who repeatedly leave MythicPlus groups. If you're not familiar with WoW or MythicPlus, don't worry, I'll explain everything you need to know. But even if you've never touched this game, I encourage you to stick around. Because this isn't just about WoW, it's about human behavior, community dynamics, and the systems we participate in, whether in games or in life. Before we dive in, I want to set the tone for this podcast. This is not a place for judgment or negativity. It's a place for curiosity, for solutions, and for a meaningful conversation. So go ahead, grab a cup of tea, and let's take this journey together. Whether you're here to reflect, to learn, or just to have something calming to listen to while you're doing your dailies, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Mindful Patch podcast. Let's start gathering. Imagine this. You log into your favorite game, your eyes scanning over the bustling capital city filled with other players gearing up for their adventures. The air feels alive with potential, possibilities of triumph, and maybe even a little chaos. You've got your goal in mind. Run a MythicPlus dungeon, a hallmark of endgame content in World of Warcraft. If you've never stepped foot into Azeroth or tackled a MythicPlus dungeon, let me paint a picture for you. These are timed dungeons designed to test a group of 5 players to their absolute limits. They're not casual strolls through an easy-to-clear map. They're puzzles of coordination, skill, and focus. As you ascend into higher levels, the stakes grow higher. Mistakes become more punishing. Success requires perfection, or something close to it. To give you some context, the keystone system in MythicPlus works a bit like a key to a locked door. Completing a dungeon within the time limit upgrades your key, unlocking harder content next time. Fail, and the key downgrades, a blow that can feel demoralizing. These keys aren't just items, they represent time, effort, and often your standing in the community. Here's where things get complicated. At its heart, MythicPlus is about teamwork, but it's also a breeding ground for friction. Success depends on everyone doing their part. A single misstep, a misplaced ability, a misjudged pull, or even a moment of hesitation can snowball into failure. And in a community where time is currency, patience is often in short supply. Let's pause for a moment and think about that. Even if you're not a gamer, this dynamic might sound familiar. Maybe you've worked on a group project while everyone's contributions felt critical to success, and one person's mistake derailed everything. Maybe you've been in a high-pressure situation where the weight of collective expectation made every small misstep feel like a disaster. The specifics may differ, but the emotional core is universal. Now, let's turn to Blizzard's Blue Post, the catalyst for today's discussion. For those unfamiliar, a Blue Post is an official communication from Blizzard Entertainment, marked by its blue text to stand out on their forums. Here's what the post says. Today, we issued gameplay suspensions to players who intentionally left MythicPlus groups a great many times in the War Within Season 1. The sort of behavior we actioned was either without regard for the experience of their fellow players, or in some cases, even deliberately intending to harm others' experiences. This is detrimental to the community of players who strive to do their part in group content the vast majority of the time. We understand that occasionally abandoning runs will happen. Players can experience unexpected real-life emergencies, internet outages, or the group collectively deciding to quit the run. Today, we suspended players who repeatedly and recklessly disrupted MythicPlus groups. We will continue to keep an eye on groups in the future, and repeat offenders are subject to escalating penalties. Mythic Plus leavers have long been a pain point for the community. Picture this. You're halfway through a dungeon, things aren't going perfectly, but they're not hopeless either. Then out of nowhere, someone decides they've had enough. They leave the group. The dungeon's progress grinds to a halt. Because the Mythic Plus system is not designed to give you the option to find a replacement, you're only left with one option at that point, and that is to abandon the run entirely. Blizzard's announcement seems like an attempt to address this frustration, but here's the catch. The post is frustratingly vague. What constitutes repeatedly leaving? Is it 5 times? 10? 50? And how does Blizzard distinguish between players who leave due to toxic teammates, real-life emergencies, or legitimate technical issues, and those who leave out of spite or selfishness? To understand why this vagueness matters so much, let's dig deeper into the cultural dynamics of Mythic Plus. At its core, this system is competitive. Higher level keys aren't just about gear, they're about prestige. Timing these keys improves your Raider IO score, a third-party metric that serves as a badge of honor or a mark of shame. This score dictates your social currency within the Mythic Plus community. Want to join a group for a high-level dungeon? Your score determines whether you're accepted or rejected. In this context, failure doesn't just feel bad, it feels like a public spectacle of inadequacy. And so, a culture emerges. A culture where leaving a dungeon early isn't just an act of frustration, it's a strategic decision. Why waste time on a run that won't improve your score? Why risk tarnishing your reputation when you can just cut your losses and try again? But let's step back and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just a story about a video game. It's a reflection of broader societal pressures. We live in a world where success is often measured by perfection, where mistakes are seen as failures rather than opportunities for growth. The Mythic Plus system amplifies these pressures, creating an environment where the stakes feel impossibly high and the margin for error feels impossibly small. Here's where Blizzard's blue post becomes both intriguing and problematic. By penalizing leavers, Blizzard is attempting to address the symptoms of a deeper issue, the toxicity and the impatience that have become ingrained in the Mythic Plus culture. But can a system designed to punish actually foster a healthier, more collaborative community? To answer that, we need to consider the psychology of gaming. What motivates players to engage with content like Mythic Plus? For many, it's about the thrill of challenge, the sense of accomplishment that comes from overcoming obstacles. But when that challenge becomes too punishing, when the fear of failure outweighs the joy of success, it can lead to burnout and disengagement. And then there's the question of trust. Mythic Plus is a team activity, and trust is its foundation. When someone leaves, it's not just a practical inconvenience, it's a breach of trust. It sends the message, your time doesn't matter, your effort doesn't matter. But what about the leavers? Are they villains, or are they victims of a system that pushes them to prioritize personal gain over collective effort? Perhaps they're both. Perhaps they're just people, navigating a complex web of expectations and pressures, trying to find their own sense of balance. So where do we go from here? How do we create a gaming culture that values patience, empathy, and collaboration over speed, perfection, and individual gain? How do we design systems that encourage players to see each other as teammates rather than obstacles? These are the questions we explore in this episode, because ultimately, this isn't just about Mythic Plus or World of Warcraft. It's about the way we interact with each other, the way we handle failure, and the way we define success. Let's read some comments from players reacting to this blue post. So comment number 1 I've seen, I think this is from the Wowhead article. It said, finally, we just had a +10 get rune earlier today because we wiped once and the healer left. I'm sick of trying to do keys, and people like that waste their time because they expect a smooth run and will ditch at the first sign that it isn't perfect. This frustration is relatable. I talked earlier about the importance of resilience in group dynamics, and this is exactly why. A wipe or two shouldn't feel like the end of the world, especially at lower key levels where recovery is entirely possible. But I also think that this comment highlights the emotional toll of being left behind. Imagine the time invested in finding the group, preparing for the dungeon, and then being abandoned because someone decided it wasn't worth their time. Pretty disheartening. Especially if you're playing a certain role where it's common to be waiting a very, very long time to even get invited. And in a lot of cases, you are waiting over an hour just to get invited as a DPS. So the second comment, which is also from the Wowhead article, it said, so now I'm forced to stay in 40 IQ groups with DPS doing tank damage and tanks being clueless on pulls, or I'll get banned? Well, this is where the nuance comes in. Sure, no one wants to stay in a group where the performance gap is too wide, but the issue is less about being forced and more about how we approach these situations. Instead of blaming the group, we could ask, why are we underperforming? Are they inexperienced, overwhelmed, distracted? I know it's frustrating to feel like you're carrying a group, but here's the thing. If the goal is a healthier community, walking out isn't the answer. And this isn't to say you're going to be spending hours just to finish a dungeon. These people are talking about level 10 keys. It's completely possible to time a key even with a wipe and some deaths in the run. MythicPlus is a team effort, and success hinges on everyone working together. A single misstep by one player, whether intentional or not, can spiral into a larger failure. Blaming individuals for what is often a group issue only deepens the toxicity. Let's bring in the Souls-like genre here, because it's a prime example of where the get good mantra originated. In games like Dark Souls, the idea of getting good is often framed as a badge of honor. The games are designed to be brutally challenging, and success comes from perseverance, patience, and learning from failure. But here's the critical difference. Souls-like games do give you the option for solo play. You can fail at your own pace, adapt your strategy, and ultimately succeed without relying on others at all. The difficulty is personal and the triumph is yours alone. MythicPlus, on the other hand, forces you to collaborate with 4 other players. The challenge isn't just the dungeon itself, it's navigating the dynamics of a team. Success requires communication, adaptability, and compromise. So while get good might work as a mindset for solo games, applying it to MythicPlus misses the point. In fact, a key part of getting good in MythicPlus is learning to work well with others even when things go wrong. It's really about resilience, not perfection, and that's a lesson that extends far beyond gaming. Let's see another comment. I don't like griefers, so I leave instead of giving them their 6 crests. They can take some time to research their class. This comment echoes the get good sentiment in a different way. It assumes that mistakes are always a sign of ignorance or laziness, but let's unpack this. First, mistakes happen for all kinds of reasons. Maybe the tank pulled too aggressively, leaving the healer without enough mana to keep up. Maybe the DPS missed an interrupt because they were focused on avoiding a mechanic. None of this necessarily means that they didn't research their class. This mentality overlooks the complexity of group dynamics. In MythicPlus, success depends on the interplay of multiple roles. A mistake by one player can force others to adapt, and that adaptation might lead to further mistakes. It's a ripple effect, not a black and white issue. Blaming individuals without understanding the bigger picture doesn't just harm the group, it erodes trust and discourages growth. Alright, next comment. It's not fair to punish players who already have high IO and don't need the key. Why should I stay if I'm not benefiting? This comment exposes a transactional mindset that's common in competitive gameplay. The idea that participation is only worthwhile if there's a clear personal gain. But here's the irony. Even high-level players benefit from staying in so-called dead keys. Every run, whether timed or not, is opportunity to refine your skills, adapt to unexpected challenges, and deepen your understanding of group dynamics. Plus, leaving prematurely affects more than just the key. It damages the community as a whole by normalizing selfish behavior and eroding the spirit of teamwork. MMO gaming, at its best, is about connection, not just with the content, but with the people you play alongside. So how do we move forward? It starts with recognizing that games are more than just systems, they're communities. And like any community, they thrive when people show up with empathy, patience, and a willingness to grow. Now that we've heard from the community, let's take a step back and think about what this all means. How do we balance individual accountability with systemic change? And how do we, as players, contribute to a healthier, more inclusive gaming environment? To truly understand why Blizzard's Blue Post has sparked such a firestorm of discussion, we need to zoom out and examine the culture that MythicPlus fosters. Because what's happening here isn't just about a group of players running a dungeon. It's about how systems shape mindsets, how mindsets shape behavior, and how behavior shapes communities. Let's go back to the fundamental mechanics of MythicPlus. On the surface, the system seems simple. Beat the timer, upgrade your key, climb the ladder. But beneath that simplicity lies a web of incentives, pressures, and unspoken rules. Think about it. What does the timer represent? It's not just a countdown, it's a source of stress. It creates a sense of urgency, a constant ticking clock that reminds you of what's at stake. Every second matters. Every pause, every death, every misstep chips away at your chance of success. Now, imagine the psychological toll of that pressure. For some players, it's exhilarating. It pushes them to perform at their best. For others, it's suffocating. It turns the game into a test they feel like they're destined to fail. And here's the kicker. MythicPlus isn't just about individual performance, it's about the performance of the group. Success or failure isn't determined by one player, it's determined by 5. If one person falters, the whole team pays the price. This creates a unique dynamic, one that's both collaborative and antagonistic. On one hand, you're working together to achieve a common goal. On the other hand, you're acutely aware of how much power each player holds to derail the goal. And that brings us to the issue of trust. Trust is the glue that holds any team together, whether it's in a game, a workplace, or a family. But in MythicPlus, that trust is fragile. It's conditional. It's based on the assumption that everyone will perform perfectly, that no one will make a mistake, and that everyone's priorities align. But let's be honest, how often do those assumptions hold true? Let's talk about the unspoken rules of MythicPlus. These aren't written in any guide or enforced by any policy, but they're understood by the community, especially at higher levels. One of the most pervasive rules is this: if a dungeon goes south, it's better to leave than to stay. At first glance, this makes sense. Why waste time on a run that won't beat the timer? Why expend energy on something that won't yield rewards? But when you step back and really think about it, this mindset is emblematic of a larger issue, the prioritization of efficiency over experience. It's a mindset that reduces players to numbers, DPS meters, healing outputs, death counts. It's a mindset that values success over learning, perfection over persistence, and it's a mindset that leaves little room for grace, patience, or understanding. But here's the thing. Games are supposed to be about more than just efficiency. They're supposed to be about fun, about connection, and about the thrill of discovery and the joy of overcoming challenges together. When did we lose sight of that? And perhaps more importantly, why? Let's not place all the blame on the players. Systems play a huge role in shaping behavior, and the MythicPlus system is no exception. By design, it incentivizes speed, precision, and perfection. It rewards success and punishes failure. But what if the system rewarded effort instead? What if it celebrated persistence, creativity, and teamwork? What if it encouraged players to see failure as a stepping stone rather than a dead end? Take, for example, the issue of key depletion. When a key is downgraded after a failed run, it feels like punishment. It's a tangible reminder of your failure. But what if instead of depleting, the key simply stayed the same? What if the focus shifted from don't fail to try again? And what about the timer? While it adds a layer of challenge, it also adds a layer of stress. What if there were alternate modes for MythicPlus dungeons? Modes that emphasize exploration, problem solving, or adaptability rather than speed. The point is, systems matter. They shape the way we play, the way we think, and the way we interact. If we want to create a healthier, more inclusive gaming culture, we need to start by examining the systems that underpin it. Now, let's talk about what happens when someone leaves a MythicPlus run. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a breach of trust. It's a moment that can feel deeply personal, even if it's not intended that way. Think about the emotional ripple effects. For the player who leaves, it might feel like a relief, a way to escape frustration or salvage their time. For the players left behind, it feels like abandonment. It's a reminder that their time and effort weren't valued. This dynamic creates a cycle of resentment. The more players leave, the more distrust builds. The more distrust builds, the less willing players are to take risks or give second chances. But what if we broke that cycle? What if instead of fostering resentment, we fostered empathy? Empathy is the antidote to toxicity. It's the ability to see things from someone else's perspective, to understand their struggles, and to respond with kindness rather than judgment. Imagine if, instead of leaving a run after the first wipe, players paused to ask, what went wrong? How can we fix it together? Imagine if, instead of blaming each other, they worked together to find solutions. This isn't just about being nice, it's about creating a culture where players feel supported rather than scrutinized. A culture where mistakes are seen as opportunities for growth rather than reasons for shame. Ultimately, this conversation isn't just about MythicPlus or World of Warcraft. It's about the way we approach challenges, the way we treat each other, and the way we define success. In a way that often feels divided and competitive, games have the power to bring people together. They have the power to create moments of connection, understanding, and joy. But to unlock that potential, we need to rethink the way we play and the way we design the spaces where we play. So as we continue this discussion, I want to leave you with a question. What kind of community do we want to build? Not just in gaming, but in life. We've unpacked a lot so far, but there's a critical element we haven't fully explored. The unspoken rules of MythicPlus. These rules, while unofficial, often dictate how players behave and the mindset they adopt. To understand the impact of Blizzard's changes and the toxicity within the MythicPlus community, we need to delve into these unwritten codes and their consequences. Every MythicPlus run operates under an unspoken social contract. When you join a group, there's an implicit agreement. You'll play your role to the best of your ability, you'll communicate effectively, and perhaps most importantly, you'll stay until the run is finished. But this social contract is fragile, especially in hierarchies where stakes are high and patience is thin. A single mistake can shatter the trust that binds a group together. Suddenly, the unspoken contract feels more like a tenuous truce. The question is this: why is this the norm? Why are people so quick to abandon ship at the first sign of trouble? At the heart of many player decisions in MythicPlus is a relentless drive for efficiency. It's a mindset that says, if this run isn't going to be perfect, it's not worth my time. And to some extent, this makes sense. Players chasing higher Raider IO scores or Grey Vault rewards have limited time. They can't afford to spend 45 minutes slogging through a depleted key when they could be timing another run instead. But here's where the problem lies. This mindset often prioritizes short-term efficiency over long-term growth. When you leave a run after a single wipe, you miss the opportunity to learn, adapt, and recover. This isn't just a loss for the group, it's a loss for the individual player as well. Some of the most valuable lessons come from runs that don't go perfectly. In fact, think back to the moments in life when you've grown the most. Were they the times when everything went smoothly? Or were they the times when you faced challenges, made mistakes, and figured out how to overcome them? Let's dive into the psychology of mistakes. When something goes wrong in a MythicPlus run, say someone misses an interrupt or pulls an extra pack, what happens? For many players, the instinctive reaction is to blame. Blame the tank for pulling too much. Blame the healer for not keeping everyone alive. Blame the DPS for not killing the ads fast enough. But blame is a defense mechanism. It's a way to deflect attention from our own vulnerabilities and shortcomings. And in a high-pressure environment like MythicPlus, it's easier to point fingers than to acknowledge that mistakes are inevitable. The truth is, mistakes are an essential part of learning. They're how we figure out what works and what doesn't. But for mistakes to be productive, we need to create a culture that allows for them. A culture that values growth over perfection. Now, let's talk about the unspoken hierarchy of keys. At lower levels, dungeons are more forgiving, and sometimes the players are too. They expect mistakes and are more willing to work through them. But once you hit plus 12, plus 15, 20, beyond that, something shifts. The pressure intensifies. These runs are often less about gear and more about prestige. Raider IO scores become a status symbol, a way to prove your worth as a player. In this environment, the margin for error shrinks to almost nothing. And the higher the key, the more likely it is that a single mistake will lead to a disband. But here's the thing. This culture of perfection isn't just toxic, it's unrealistic. Even the best players make mistakes. Even the most coordinated groups wipe. And expecting anything else is setting yourself up for disappointment. One of the most controversial aspects of the MythicPlus system is key depletion. When a key isn't timed, it downgrades one key level. On the surface, this seems fair. It's a way to ensure that keys reflect a group's capability. But in practice, it creates a fear of failure that discourages experimentation and risk-taking. Think about it. If you know a single mistake could cost you your key, are you more likely to push your limits or play it safe? Are you more likely to stick it out with a struggling group or cut your losses and leave? The key depletion system doesn't just punish failure, it punishes effort. It tells players that trying and failing is worse than not trying at all. And that's a dangerous message to send, both in games and in life. So how do we break the cycle of blame, perfectionism, and fear of failure? It starts with rethinking the way we approach MythicPlus. Success shouldn't be about timing the key. It should be about the experience, about learning, improving, and having fun. Instead of punishing failure, reward persistence. Create systems that celebrate effort and adaptability. Remember that everyone has bad days. Everyone makes mistakes, and everyone deserves a second chance. To the MythicPlus community, I want to pose a challenge. The next time something goes wrong in a run, pause before you react. Instead of blaming or leaving, ask yourself, how can I turn this setback into an opportunity? Because at the end of the day, MythicPlus isn't just about keys or timers or loot. It's about people. It's about coming together to overcome challenges and create moments of connection and triumph. And if we can do that, if we can prioritize community over competition, growth over perfection, then we can create a gaming culture that isn't just healthier, but more rewarding for everyone involved. While we've spent considerable time analyzing the community's behavior and mindsets, we'd be remiss not to examine the systems in place that contribute to these issues. After all, player toxicity doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's often a reaction to the systems and environments designed by game developers. Blizzard, as the architect of World of Warcraft, has a responsibility to create systems that encourage cooperation and discourage toxicity. But in many ways, the current MythicPlus system does the opposite. As we've discussed, the fear of key depletion has created a perfection or bust mentality among players. This isn't just a player problem, it's a design problem. By tying key progression to flawless performance, Blizzard has unintentionally fostered a culture where mistakes are unforgivable. This creates an environment where leaving feels like a rational choice, even if it's ultimately detrimental to the group. The recent blue post about punishing leavers is a step in the right direction, maybe, but players are left wondering, how many times can I leave before I'm penalized? What counts as intentional griefing versus a legitimate reason to leave? This lack of clarity breeds anxiety and distrust, further fracturing an already fragile community. Unlike other games with robust systems for addressing player disputes, WoW lacks meaningful in-game tools for recognizing positive behavior or mediating conflict. Without these tools, the burden of resolving disputes falls entirely on players, which often leads to toxicity and blame. If Blizzard truly wants to improve the MythicPlus experience, they need to go beyond punishing leavers. Here are a few ideas. Introduce a key recycling system. Instead of depleting a key after a failed run, allow players to reattempt the same level. This would reduce the fear of failure and encourage groups to stick together even after setbacks. Now that we've explored the idea of removing key downgrades, let's take a step back and consider the bigger picture. MythicPlus is more than just a timer or a challenge. It's a system and culture that has evolved over the years. For some, it's the pinnacle of group-based gameplay, testing coordination, skill, and strategy. For others, it's a source of stress and frustration, with every mistake feeling magnified by high stakes. The question we have to ask ourselves is this: how can we make MythicPlus not only challenging but also rewarding and, perhaps more importantly, healthy for the players and the community? Picture this. You're running a plus 12 key, aiming to time it and secure a reward, but something goes wrong. A missed interrupt or a wipe that wasn't in the script. Suddenly, the mood shifts. Someone leaves, the key downgrades, and what could have been a learning experience turns into a source of resentment. It's a cycle that repeats far too often, and it's clear that the current system isn't working for everyone. Let's imagine a world where failing a key doesn't mean hitting a brick wall. Instead of immediately downgrading the key, what if failure opened up an alternate path? Imagine if, after an untimed run, the key transformed into a practice mode. You'd revisit the same dungeon at the same level without the pressure of a timer, allowing you to redefine your strategy, adapt, and prepare for the next attempt. Completing this mode could reward you with a token to restore your key to its original level. This way, failure becomes a detour toward growth rather than a dead end. Now, I know what you're thinking. This might work in theory, but in practice, people pugging MythicPlus aren't likely to want to rerun the same dungeon with the same group. And you're right. In pugs, where groups are more transactional, players often want to get in, complete their objective, and move on. So how do we create solutions that address the realities of pug culture? One idea is the concept of key insurance. Players could earn tokens passively through normal gameplay, completing dungeons, achieving milestones, or participating in events. These tokens could act as a safety net, preventing a key from downgrading after a failed run. This system acknowledges the time and effort players invest in their keys while giving them a layer of protection against the unexpected. But let's talk about something even more fundamental: the disconnect between player goals. The current LFG system allows groups to label the runs as completion, standard, or timing. In theory, this should help players find like-minded teammates, but in practice, these labels don't hold much weight. How many times have you joined a completion run only to see players leave at the first sign of trouble? To make these labels meaningful, there needs to be accountability and incentives. What if completing a dungeon under a completion label offered tangible rewards, bonus crests, unique cosmetics, or even special resources? These rewards would reinforce the idea that staying to the end is valuable, regardless of whether the key is timed. It's about making the experience worthwhile for everyone involved. And speaking of rewards, let's address the elephant in the room. Are the current MythicPlus rewards enough? For many players, the seasonal mount for 2KIO, the portals for +10s, and the titles for the top % feel out of reach. While these rewards are motivating for a subset of players, they don't resonate with the broader community. What made WoW's earlier eras so iconic was the sense of rarity and prestige tied to rewards, items that told a story of effort, collaboration, and mastery. MythicPlus could benefit from revisiting this philosophy. Imagine rewards that feel personal and meaningful, even if you're not among the top 1%. But rewards alone won't fix the issues. The real heart of MythicPlus lies in its group dynamics. Unlike a game like Dark Souls, where success or failure is entirely your own, MythicPlus requires collaboration. If one person falters, the entire group feels it. This interconnectedness is both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. It creates moments of incredible synergy, but also moments of frustration when goals and expectations don't align. What if we leaned into that collaborative spirit by rewarding mentorship? High IO players could earn exclusive rewards for guiding lower IO players through challenging content. Completing a +10 or higher with a first-timer could grant unique mounts, titles, or cosmetics. This would encourage a more supportive community, where experienced players see value in helping others. Of course, not everyone is here to teach, and that's okay. For those focused on efficiency and timing, matchmaking should prioritize like-minded players, ensuring that groups are aligned in their goals. For learners, there should be a separate track, one that rewards effort and persistence without the pressure of perfection. Finally, we need to talk about accountability. Right now, the burden of failure falls disproportionately on the key holder. If the group falls apart, their key drops a level, while everyone else walks away unscathed. This imbalance fosters resentment and discourages players from forming new groups. A fair system might involve spreading the consequences more evenly, but only if it's done in a way that doesn't punish players unfairly. Perhaps the answer lies in subtle behavior-based systems. Players who leave groups prematurely could face temporary restrictions on accessing higher key levels, while those who consistently complete runs, timed or untimed, could earn points toward exclusive rewards. It's about encouraging accountability without being punitive. At its core, MythicPlus should be about more than just beating the timer. It's about the stories we create, the challenges we overcome, and the connections we forge. By addressing the flaws in the system and implementing solutions that respect player goals and experiences, we can turn MythicPlus into something truly rewarding. A space where players feel valued, supported, and inspired to grow. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about keys or timers. It's about the people we play with and the community we build together. And that's a system worth fixing. As we talk about improving the MythicPlus system for the sake of community dynamics and mental health, we can't ignore another critical piece of the puzzle: our physical well-being. Gaming is an escape for many of us, a refuge from the stresses of daily life, but it can also pose its own challenges if we're not careful. MythicPlus is a prime example. With its fast pace, high stakes, and intense focus, it's easy to lose track of time. A single run might take 30 minutes, but once you factor in group formation, queuing, and strategy discussions, a session can easily stretch to hours. And let's face it, most of us don't pause after a run and think, I should stretch my legs. We hit the queue for the next key, glued to our chairs, hyper-focused on the gameplay. But the truth is, that kind of prolonged sitting isn't just exhausting, it's physically harmful. Over time, it can lead to issues like back pain, poor circulation, and even repetitive strain injuries. So how can we address this without disrupting the flow of MythicPlus? No one wants their dungeon run interrupted by a pop-up saying, take a stretch break. But there are subtle, thoughtful ways to nudge players towards better habits without ruining the immersive experience. One idea I've considered is introducing light, optional prompts between runs. Something like, take a moment to hydrate, or stretch while your group regroups. It's not intrusive, it doesn't interrupt the gameplay, but it plants a seed. It reminds us that, even in the middle of chasing gear or climbing the leaderboard, we need to take care of the person behind the keyboard. Another approach could involve offering small, optional rewards for healthy behavior. For example, after completing a series of consecutive dungeons, the game could say something like, great work, you've been running dungeons back to back, why not take a 5-minute break? Come back refreshed, and we'll grant you a small bonus, like extra crests. It's a gentle encouragement to step away without penalizing anyone who wants to keep going. I know, for some players, even this might seem like overreach. After all, gaming is a personal experience, and no one wants to feel like they're being micromanaged. But the goal isn't to tell anyone how to play, it's to create an environment that gently supports healthier habits. At the end of the day, our physical health is our own responsibility. Blizzard can offer the tools, but it is up to us to use them. For those of us who love the thrill of MythicPlus, there's no reason we can't balance that intensity with moments of care. A quick stretch between runs or a glass of water between pulls isn't just a small act of self-care. It's a way to ensure that we can enjoy this game for years to come without burning out or compromising our health. And really, isn't that what this whole conversation is about? Making Mythic Plus and gaming as a whole something that sustains us, not drains us. Whether it's creating a more supportive community, rethinking punitive systems, or simply reminding each other to take a moment to ourselves, every small step makes a difference. So as we move forward in this discussion, let's keep that in mind. The goal isn't just to fix the game mode, it's to make the experience of playing it better for everyone involved in every way that matters. If Blizzard is the architect of the systems we play in, then players are the lifeblood of the community. No matter how well designed or flawed the system is, it's the individuals within it who determine its overall health. Let's take some time to reflect on what each of us can do to make Mythic Plus a more enjoyable experience. The Mythic Plus environment, like any online community, is shaped by individual choices. Every interaction, whether it's a simple hi at the start of a dungeon or a toxic comment after a wipe, contributes to the overall culture. Let's break it down. Many players enter Mythic Plus with a win-or-lose mentality, treating it like a high-stakes competitive match rather than a cooperative challenge. Shifting this mindset to focus on collaboration and improvement can have a profound impact. For example, instead of blaming a tank for a bad pull, ask how you can adjust your gameplay to support the group better. Psychological research shows that positive interactions at the start of a group activity can set the tone for the entire experience. A simple good luck team or we've got this can lower tension and encourage teamwork. It literally costs nothing but can change the entire dynamic. Imagine a real-world team that doesn't talk to each other. It would fail. The same principle applies here. Even if you've been in a run where everyone was absolutely silent, no one said a word and you still succeeded. But do we really want to foster that type of disconnection in the community? One of the most insidious aspects of online gaming is the normalization of toxic behavior. But toxicity isn't inevitable, it's a choice, and every player has the power to choose differently. As discussed earlier, not all mistakes are equal. Some are mechanical errors, others are the result of adapting to unforeseen circumstances. Recognizing this can help shift the narrative from bad player to human player. For example, I once wiped a group because my cooldowns weren't aligned. It wasn't due to ignorance, but because I had to adapt to another player's mistakes earlier. Yet I was labeled as bad. Experiences like this show how quick we are to judge without understanding context. Before you criticize a teammate, ask yourself, am I contributing to the problem or the solution? Am I upset because of their mistake or because of how it impacts me personally? This level of self-awareness is rare but transformative. Next time you feel frustrated in a group, pause and reflect on why. Is it the actual mistake or the pressure you're putting on yourself to perform perfectly? Kindness isn't just a feel-good concept. It's a practical tool for building better communities. Research shows that acts of kindness are contagious, inspiring others to pay it forward. In Mythic Plus, this can mean an encouragement over criticism, mentorship, or acknowledging effort. If someone messes up, saying, "We got this," is far more effective than "you're trash." If you're experienced, consider offering advice instead of disdain. Thanking your group at the end of the run, even if it didn't go perfectly, reinforces positivity. Sometimes toxicity is less about the system or other players and more about individual burnout. Mythic Plus can be mentally taxing, especially for those pushing higher keys. Recognizing when you're burnt out and taking breaks is crucial for maintaining a healthy mindset. What are some signs of burnout? Feeling irritable, dreading group content, or snapping at teammates are all red flags. So the solution here? Step back. Play a low-pressure activity like farming herbs or leveling an alt. This podcast, with its chill gathering footage, is a perfect example of how to unwind while staying connected to the game. As much as individual behavior matters, group dynamics often dictate the success or failure of a run. Understanding these dynamics is key. A group of average players who communicate and adapt will often outperform a group of highly skilled players who don't. This is a concept supported by countless studies in teamwork and organizational behavior. Think of a sports team. Even the best athletes can't win if they don't work together. Also consider the blame game. Blame is the quickest way to destroy group morale. Instead of focusing on who's at fault, focus on what can be done differently moving forward. After a wipe, take a moment to assess and plan, saying, let's try pulling these mobs differently. It's far more productive than why didn't you interrupt, especially when you pug, which means you're just playing with random players. If multiple players use their interrupt ability on one single mob and then they don't have the ability ready for another mob, that other mob will have its cast go off and then, oh, we missed an interrupt. So we really have to be careful when blaming others and understand that gameplay can be extremely nuanced. The current narrative in MythicPlus is one of frustration and toxicity, but it doesn't have to be. By shifting our mindset and behavior, we can create a new narrative, one of resilience, learning, and camaraderie. In your next MythicPlus run, focus on being a positive influence. Whether it's through communication, encouragement, or simply staying calm under pressure, commit to making the experience better for everyone involved. As someone who has spent years in the MythicPlus scene, I've seen the best and worst of the community. I've been in groups that felt like a well-oiled machine and others that dissolved into chaos after a single mistake. I think it's mindset. When players approach MythicPlus as a collaborative challenge rather than a competition, the experience is infinitely better. And while Blizzard has a role to play in fostering this mindset, the real change starts within us. Improving the MythicPlus community isn't just about punishing leavers or fixing the system. It's about creating a culture of accountability, empathy, and growth. And that starts with each of us. As much as MythicPlus is a gaming experience, it's also a microcosm of life. The challenges, frustrations, victories, and setbacks we face in-game often mirror those in the real world. In this part, we'll explore the lessons MythicPlus offers, not just for improving runs, but for enhancing our personal lives and relationships. In MythicPlus, no run is ever the same. Even with a pre-planned route, unexpected things happen. Someone misses an interrupt, a tank miscalculates a pull, or mechanics don't align perfectly. The same is true in life. Life rarely goes according to plan. Whether it's a flat tire on the way to work or an unexpected expense, the ability to adapt separates those who thrive from those who flounder. Remember that time your group accidentally pulled an extra pack in Halls of Failure? Instead of panicking, you adapted by focusing interrupts and burning cooldowns. The same resilience applies to real-world challenges as well. Just like in MythicPlus, adaptability is a skill that improves with practice. The more you face unexpected situations, the better you become at handling them. Treat every setback, whether in-game or in life, as an opportunity to learn and grow. Ask yourself, what can I do differently next time? Lesson number 2. Communication can make or break you. Good communication is the foundation of any successful MythicPlus run. Without it, even the best players can falter. The same principle applies in relationships, teams, and communities in the real world. Misunderstandings in MythicPlus, like a healer thinking the tank is pulling one pack when they actually pull two, can lead to wipes. Similarly, unclear communication in life can lead to conflict and inefficiency. In a recent run, my group wiped because no one called out that Bloodlust was ready. It's a simple communication failure, but it cost us precious time. How often does this happen in our personal lives too? Good communication isn't just about speaking, it's about listening. In MythicPlus, this means paying attention to callouts and adapting accordingly. In life, it means truly hearing what others are saying before responding. In your next conversation, focus on listening without interrupting. Notice if the dynamic changes. Lesson number 3, perfection is a myth. One of the biggest sources of frustration in MythicPlus is the expectation of perfection. But the truth is, no one is perfect, not in-game and certainly not in life. Many players feel immense pressure to execute flawlessly, especially in high keys. But this pressure often leads to burnout and toxicity, both in Mythic Plus and in life. It's okay to make mistakes. What matters is how you respond to them. Do you learn and improve, or do you spiral into negativity? Some of the best lessons come from failures. A wipe in Mythic Plus might teach you a better pull strategy. A failure in life might teach you resilience or resourcefulness. Lesson 4. Collaboration is greater than competition. While Mythic Plus is often seen as a competitive activity, it's ultimately about collaboration. Success depends on every member of the group working together, not competing against each other. In Mythic Plus, no single player can carry the group. Even the best DPS can't succeed without a solid tank and healer. This mirrors life, where collaboration often leads to the best outcomes. Here's an analogy. A workplace team achieves more when its members support each other rather than vying for individual recognition. The same is true in Mythic Plus. Also consider the role of empathy. Understanding your teammates' perspectives, why the healer might be struggling, why the tank pool cautiously, can foster better teamwork. Empathy is just as valuable as it is in Mythic Plus. In your next run, try to view the game from your teammates' perspective. What challenges might they be facing? How can you support them? Lesson 5. Time management and prioritization. Mythic Plus runs are timed, forcing players to prioritize and manage their actions carefully. This is a valuable skill both in-game and in life. The timer in Mythic Plus teaches you to focus on what's important and avoid distractions. Similarly, life is full of time-sensitive decisions that require careful prioritization. For example, in a recent run, my group decided to skip a pack to save time. It was a calculated risk that paid off. In life, knowing what to skip or say no to is just as important. Another aspect of this lesson is avoiding the trap of overcommitment. Many players overcommit by trying to push too many keys in one session, leading to fatigue and poor performance. The same happens in life when we take on too much at once. Focus on what truly matters. Lesson 6. The impact of a growth mindset. At its core, Mythic Plus is about growth. Improving your skills, mastering mechanics, and achieving higher scores. This growth mindset is equally valuable in life. Every Mythic Plus run, whether successful or not, offers lessons. The same is true of life's challenges. Viewing setbacks as opportunities for growth can transform your perspective. Think about a recent failure. What did it teach you? How can you apply that lesson moving forward? Just as you benefit from a growth mindset, so do your teammates. In your next run, focus on supporting a teammate's growth. Offer constructive feedback or encouragement. Mythic Plus is more than just a game mode, it's a reflection of life. The skills we develop in-game, from adaptability to teamwork, are directly applicable to the real world. By approaching Mythic Plus with intention and mindfulness, we can not only improve our runs, but also enrich our lives. Now that we've explored the lessons Mythic Plus offers about life in gaming, it's time to focus on solutions. This part will examine both Blizzard's role in shaping the Mythic Plus environment and the player's responsibilities in creating a supportive culture. One of the major criticisms of the recent blue post is the vagueness surrounding penalties for leaving keys. To build trust and encourage compliance, Blizzard must clarify the system. Players need to know what qualifies as intentional disruption and how many instances lead to consequences. For example, Blizzard could implement a visible warning system. You have X keys in Y timeframe. Continued behavior may result in penalties. Many competitive games like League of Legends have clear systems for punishing disruptive behavior. While not perfect, these systems provide transparency that Mythic Plus currently lacks. As mentioned earlier, key depletion fuels much of the frustration and toxicity in Mythic Plus. By penalizing the group rather than the individual who leaves, the system creates an environment of mistrust and resentment. Offer bonus rewards for staying in challenging runs, like additional crests or cosmetic items. While Blizzard can set the stage, the community must also take responsibility for its culture. Toxicity thrives when players focus solely on individual goals rather than group success. Let's explore how we as players can shift this mindset. Even a bad run has value. Whether it's learning a new mechanic or understanding a group dynamic, every run contributes to growth. Think back to a frustrating run. What did you learn from it? I once ran a +10 where we wiped on the first boss because of a missed interrupt. Instead of leaving, we regrouped, communicated, and ultimately timed the key. That experience taught me the power of perseverance and effective callouts. It's easy to blame others for mistakes, but every player brings their own challenges to the table, whether it's lack of experience, personal stress, or even disabilities. Personally, I deal with an autoimmune condition, and one of my symptoms is inflamed joints, which definitely can interfere with gameplay. So if I ever make a mistake in a run or anything that I do, yeah, it's a possibility that the player that has made a mistake in your run is dealing with something very serious. High-level players often forget what it's like to be new. Instead of ridiculing less experienced teammates, offer guidance. For example, if someone in your group doesn't know a mechanic, take a moment to explain it. This small act can improve not only the current run, but also the player's future performance. Think of MythicPlus as a communal effort. Every player you help improves the pool of players overall, making for better runs in the long term. What about holding toxic players accountable? Just as Blizzard is cracking down on leavers, we as players must stand against toxic behavior. Imagine a workplace where one person constantly undermines others. If no one speaks up, the behavior continues. The same principle applies in MythicPlus. Ultimately, the question isn't just about MythicPlus, but about the community we want to build. Do we want a culture of blame and division, or one of support and collaboration? Building a positive community requires effort from everyone, developers and players alike. When we take ownership of our actions and attitudes, we contribute to a healthier environment. Here's a challenge for you. Take one lesson from this episode and apply it outside of gaming. Maybe it's practicing patience with a coworker or supporting a friend through a tough time. The MythicPlus community reflects both the best and the worst of online gaming. By addressing the flaws in Blizzard systems and shifting our own mindsets, we have the power to create a healthier, more enjoyable experience for everyone. As we close this first episode of the Mindful Patch podcast, let's reflect on what we've explored. This episode isn't just about World of Warcraft or MythicPlus, it's also the lessons we can learn from gaming as a whole. Gaming should be a source of joy and growth, not stress and frustration. We need to create spaces where players feel supported, not judged. Next time you log in, consider how your actions contribute to the community around you. Also, think about the role of systems in shaping behavior. In life, as in gaming, our environments influence our actions. How can we advocate for systems that promote well-being and collaboration? So let's just touch on the actionable takeaways. For players, approach each MythicPlus run with a mindset of growth and adaptability. Speak up against toxicity, whether it's reporting disruptive players or supporting a struggling teammate. For Blizzard, increased transparency in penalty systems to build trust. Reevaluate mechanics like key depletion that fuel frustration and toxicity for everybody. Reflect on how gaming fits into your overall well-being. Is it a source of relaxation and joy, or is it just adding stress to your life? In upcoming episodes, we'll explore topics like the psychology of gamer burnout, why do we keep grinding even when it's no longer fun, lessons from gaming for real-life relationships, balancing challenge and fun in games, why some systems feel punishing instead of rewarding. To everyone listening and watching, thank you for joining me on this journey. The Mindful Patch podcast is about creating a space for meaningful discussions, whether you're a longtime gamer, a casual player, or just someone curious about the intersection of gaming and life. I started this podcast because I believe in the potential of gaming to bring people together and teach us valuable lessons. But for that to happen, we need to address the toxicity and systemic flaws that hold us back. Share your thoughts in the comments or on social media. What resonated with you? What do you want to see discussed in future episodes? And that's a wrap for episode 1 of the Mindful Patch podcast. I hope you found something valuable in today's discussion. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, or sharing it with a friend. And if you're gathering in your own game tonight, I hope you find something rare and beautiful, both in game and in life.